And we're going to talk about Master Duel Worlds, because that's apparently what all of you guys care about, because I've been getting a ton of questions about it. And we're going to talk about Master Duel Worlds. Hold up. Regarding rules for World Championships 2023 finals. The Master Duel event at the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2023 will be held in person in Japan on August 5th and 6th. Which, by the way, chat, I'm gonna be honest, I'm scared of the weather in Japan because it's already super hot in Germany. And I've been to Japan before. The weather there is not kind to me. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel World Championship 2023 finals will be a team battle between teams of 3. 8 teams made up of representatives from each region will compete to be the champion. The finals consist of the first stage and final tournament. The first stage is a round-robin tournament with teams split into 2 groups. 2 teams from each group will qualify for the final tournament. A match between 2 teams is called a round. A round consists of each player playing 1 duel against everyone on the opposing team. Each round consists of 3 sets of 3 simultaneous duels. What this means is we're gonna have a group stage of 2 groups of 4 teams, and then we have the final tournament, which is a fancy word for top 4. During rounds, players can talk with their teammates and watch their duels after finishing their own duels. However, they cannot watch other teams' duels or listen to other teams' conversations. The winner of a round is the team that won the most duels, which means 5. It's basically best of 9. If the number of duels won is tied, the round-winning team will be decided by a duel between the team representatives. So if, for example, if it's 4-4, and then game 9 ends in a draw, which I don't know how that would even be possible in Master Duel. There's probably ways, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. That would be the tiebreaker. All of this is good to know, but it was kind of expected. You know, we kind of knew it was teams all along, so we expected rules to be somewhat like this. How do we build our decks for this event is the even crazier part, the most interesting part here, also the most important. All decks must follow the Forbidden and Limited list effective as of July 14th. This is the one that has Silva and Expulsion banned. This was important to know for us because that means as of July 14th, when that ban list comes into effect, we can start testing and preparing, and there will be no further ban lists. And they can only consist of cards available on that date. Same thing as before. This means the next set that's coming out in 2 days is the only set that's going to be released until Worlds. And it means we only need to prepare with those cards in mind. We don't have to expect any surprise release like week before Worlds. We're going to drop Cash Tira on you. Not gonna happen. Each player can use up to 2 decks and can choose which of the 2 to use for each duel. 6 decks per team in total. This is interesting. This means every player has to bring 2 decks to the event. Each round you can decide which of the 2 decks you want to play. If you only like 1 deck, you can play that 1 deck throughout the entire tournament. You never have to use your backup deck, but there is a backup deck. The way I think that's gonna go is you're gonna have 1 deck that you're really comfortable with, that you think is really good for every of the 3 players, and then you're gonna have like a maybe more situational second deck that maybe counters some certain strategies. The most important part is now. There can be at most 3 copies of each card across all of each team's decks. If a card is limited or semi-limited, only 1 or 2 copies respectively can be included across all of each team's decks. Example: if you put 2 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon in one of your decks, you can only include 1 more copy across other decks. If you put 3 copies of Red Eyes Black Dragon in one of your decks, you cannot put any more copies in any other decks. If you put 1 copy of Called By in one of your decks, you can only include 1 more copy across all other decks. How many subs for MathMech as second deck? I'm not gonna tell you the number, you just have to go ahead and find out. What this is referred to, it's commonly known as shared card pool, which is a thing in Duel Links. It is an interesting concept because it forces you to build different decks, right? The only problem is there are certain cards, of course, in Master Duel, we all know which cards I'm referring to, that are pretty much present in every deck. And so it would be very weird if you had to build 6 decks with only 3 Maxis total. So they added a little bit of an extra rule to make that not a problem. Each team can designate up to 3 shared cards. If a card is designated as a shared card, up to 3 copies can be included in each deck, of course, unless it's limited or semi-limited. So basically, we can choose 3 cards that are excluded from this rule, which you could refer to this rule as the Maxi rule. I believe that almost every team, probably every team, is going to have Ash and Maxi as their shared cards. Let's be real. I'm not even giving any information away. Everyone's first thought when they read this rule is Maxi Ash. And I think that's for good reason. The extra deck is going to make building decks past the first 3 really hard. I mean, let's say we look at a card like Access Code Talker, which is a really good extra deck card. However, Access Code Talker is unlimited in Master Duel, which means you can play 1 copy of Access Code Talker in 3 different decks. And then the other 3 decks cannot have Access Code Talker. The same is true for cards like Sprite Elf, Nightmare Unicorn, Nightmare Phoenix, IP Masquerena. A lot of cards that are very generically strong, right? That is a problem. However, I don't think that makes it worth using one of those cards as a shared card. I don't think anyone is going to use something like Access Code as their shared card because there are decks that can go without Access Code. I'm not even sure if you're going to have 3 decks with Access Code because like Sprite decks don't run it, Tearlaments decks don't run it, Labyrinth decks don't need it, I think. There you go. You have like 3 really good decks that don't need Access Code. Zeus, on the other hand, is different, right? Because Zeus, if you play something like Sprite, that really wants Zeus. Tearlaments want Zeus. And then there's other decks that also really want Zeus. My interpretation of this rule is we need to bring 6 different decks that are very different from each other. The only cards we can play in all decks are Maxi, Ash, and 1 more. That's basically what this means. Very simple. Sounds like an interesting format, honestly. I am a fan of this. I'm not sure if the 3 shared card rule is the best way to balance this out, but I personally think it is cool that we are forced to bring different decks, that we are not forced to all playing the same deck each round. Finding 6 top decks in a Yu-Gi-Oh format is not easy. There's probably going to be a large gap in quality between the best deck, like the first best deck, and the 6th best deck. There's going to be a difference in quality. But the cool thing here is that you don't have to play all of those 6 decks in the tournament, right? Every duelist has 2 decks, and you can technically always only play 1 of them, right? You only need 1 good deck for each player, which means you only need to find like the best 3 decks, and then you can do like the second deck can be a little bit more like off the wall, more situational, doesn't have to be brought in every round. So I think that's kind of what you do, right? You kind of try to find the 3 best, most solid decks for each player, and then you try to round it out with like a good secondary deck. Deck lists will be unknown or deck lists will be public. That is something I do not know for sure. I am guessing that the decks are not public because it doesn't say so. So I'm just assuming it's going to be a normal hidden deck list. I don't know why it would be open deck list if it doesn't say it here. Are you concerned about back row decks because shared rules make back row removal scarce? You're bringing up a good point. A deck like Labyrinth is in an interesting spot because cards like Cosmic Cyclone, Harpy's Feather Duster, Evenly Matched, Lightning Storm, no one is going to design those cards as their shared card. However, the thing is, the same applies to all of the floodgates and all of the really good trap cards. You can probably only bring 1 Labyrinth deck, and that's going to be a good pick, right? I think Labyrinth is good. However, it is possible, for example, imagine the following scenario, right? Well, one of our opponents plays Labyrinth. We play at the same time, right? Let's say I'm player A and the other 2 are players B and C, and I play against Labyrinth. I can tell the other 2, hey, my opponent is the Labyrinth player. And so when they go up against my opponent in the next round, they could pick the second deck, and we could just make the second deck really good against Labyrinth, right? You could make the second deck have like Cosmics and everything, and then when you play against the dude that has Labyrinth, you could think about picking that deck. So there's a lot of interesting strategy here. There's a lot of counter strategy as well, I think, for back row strategies like Labyrinth. It's not as clear cut. Then they switch to Adamantipator. See, that's where we go levels, right? That's where it becomes interesting. Is the Labyrinth player not going to play Labyrinth the next round because then your opponent might be on an anti-back row strategy? Who knows? That's where it becomes really interesting with like lineup construction and deck building and everything. Of course, it can get a little bit like gambly as well, right? Like you think, oh, surely they're going to switch away from Labyrinth, so I'm not going to bring the counter, and then they just rock Labyrinth again. But I think it's a very interesting concept. I'm looking forward to it for sure. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to do a lot of testing for that as well.